Don't you judge me. Hey, what's going on, everybody? Grunt Killer back at it again. Just wanted to let you guys know what is ahead in this beautiful video. A custom collectible job I'm going to be doing on the Halo Energy Sword prop that I picked up at the Raleigh SuperCon. Now, since the prop I picked up was a foam rubber custom made piece by a chair at the con, it's not something that everybody's going to be able to get their hands on. So the tutorial I'm going to show can be used on any of the props, specifically the one that made by Mattel. That prop can have this done to it. If you make a prop yourself, pretty much any one you can do, you can use this method I'm going to show. And without further ado, let's get into it.
Blah, 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 blah. Okay. So, here we have the prop already, just the way it came, straight out. Looks okay, but we're going to give it some love. So basically, you just want to look over the prop, kind of get the idea, get a feel, figure out what needs to be done. That's pretty much just basic prop manufacturing and modification 101. So right now, you can see that I'm focusing on the seam because those seams need to be cleaned very, very well. Because you don't want big old seams to be on your prop. It takes away from the overall aesthetic. They are a major, major no-no. No-no. So, basically the easiest way to take care of that is to grab a Dremel tool or a piece of sandpaper if you don't have a Dremel available, and just very carefully run the Dremel up and down the seam, blending out the entire area, making sure that you're not damaging the piece. You don't want to cut too much into the foam with this, or the plastic, whatever you're working on. You just want to make sure that it's nice and smooth, because you can see now it's so smooth compared to that big nasty seam that used to be present on the prop. And if you want to, and it's best if painting plastic, to sand all over the entire prop, because you need to have something for the paint you're going to add later to grip to. And now we can move on to the next step. So the next step is taking the nice and beautifully sanded down prop of any form and basically just double checking and getting all of the seams covered, making sure that they're all still good, the prop isn't splitting, there's no damage, it's still a perfectly fine prop. And now we're going to go on the inside and Dremel out the inner blade, because it has to be completely Dremeled all over. So next part is going to be cutting away some of the excess foam that was left from the molding process that is still on the hilt. Because that's not very pretty, they went ahead and gave us the ability to have a grip there, so I'm just going to clean that up and make it look a little bit more professional. Make it look more like those grips are actually real. So, as I get the piece into focus with the camera, apologies right here, setting this shot up was a bit of a pain. So, what I used here was a Stanley pen, or just a razor blade, something you can pick up from the craft store for about $1, and was just going in at an angle in every single one of the little grooves, and then just cutting a triangle out, popping it out, and then later going back over it and hitting it with a Dremel. So as you can see, going in at both angles, popped out, and it already looks a little bit better. And you can imagine how it's going to look even better when the rest of these little triangles are popped out. And this is one of those times where you take your time, you do it right, you don't rush. It's going to look very, very good. And then just being careful and just slowly working your way down to the edge of the piece. Now, this is pretty much only on foam props. If it's on the Mattel plastic prop, you just have to be very careful in cleaning up the seam around that section. I have seen the seam on that section. It is pretty nasty. So it will basically require just a little bit of a light sanding. So now you can see going in a little more aggressively, getting some of that chunky mess off. And now you can see how the side I already taken care of looks pretty much identical to the piece we just took care of. Oh yeah, here we go. Next step. So for the next step, what you're going to want to do is just lightly go back over all the edges and every single one with a incredibly fine grit sanding bit on the end of a Dremel, or a fine grit sandpaper. Now, you'll notice that this prop needs a lot of sanding, but that's something that's pretty much normal for all props. You just want to make sure that it's going to be okay, and it's going to be perfectly smooth for when you want to get that final money shot. And as you can see right here, I'm using a feathering technique where you quickly run the blade back and forth over one section, which is just going to give a much more even slide of area. So just one of those little techniques that you can use. It's very simple and it's very effective because you can see how some of the areas that I got still had silver on them, so they were actually uneven from where I sanded. But now that I'm using the feather technique, it's actually completely smoothing out that area. So it's very useful little technique. It may actually not be called feathering, but that's what I call it, so go ahead and adopt that if you wish. But it was a pretty quick little fix. Just rub your hand up and down the blade and make sure it's all clean, because you do not want any dust left over when you paint. And there you go. Now moving on to the next step. So, the next step here is putting a few little scratches and dings in. Now you can do this with anything. You can do it with a piece of sandpaper that's folded up. You can do it with a Stanley knife. You can do it with pretty much anything. I'm doing it with a razor blade, not razor blade, I apologize, Dremel, because it's a little bit simpler and I like the look of Dremel cuts. So this is completely optional. You don't have to do this, but it is fun and adds a level of depth. Because Halo is a war. It's set in a war. So putting scratches and dings into the hilt of the energy sword gives it that feel of this thing's been through hell. It's been on the battlefield. It's just taken a lot of beatings, and it's been used in a lot of fights. So just very lightly going in, not even really cutting past the paint layer on it really, just barely cutting into that foam or plastic depending on what you have, and just giving it that battle damage. Oh yeah, fuck you. Okay. And there you go. Now it is ready for the next step, and this is where it gets fun. So right now, here we go. We got our Rust-Oleum 2-in-1 Ultra Cover Silver Chrome Paint. Now what this is this is going to function as a primer for this prop. Always shake it up because you want to make sure that it's going to spray out in an even coat. Now, I would have normally... Oh, and also, always spray very cakily. What that means is, you don't want to do this, where you just spray over and over. You want to bathe it. You want to blend it. And this will be the end result, is a prop completely blended in silver. Now what that is functioning as was a cover for the blue translucent paint that we put over the blades. Now what I used for the blue translucent paint was a Rust-Oleum, was a Model Masters. After the Model Masters blue has set, you simply take some metallic paint. I use acrylic because acrylic is the best, and a rather stiff brush because you require that. And you now do the arduous task of adding the electrical lightning bolts. Now, there is no set pattern to do this properly. I prefer to go with a much more angular path for the electricity to be flowing. So instead of a fluid like those two little squiggles that used to be on the prop, I actually want to add very jagged, very crackly looking lightning. So as you can see, I'm just dipping the tip of the brush in, occasionally running it down a couple of strokes in one spot to lengthen it out, but I'm really just tapping that bristle to the blade a couple of times, just getting those little jagged lightning strike areas painted on and set. This process is not a quick one. You want to take your time and do this right, because this truly is the fun part of the process. This gives the energy sword personality, makes it look like it's actually made of living energy, like the thing is currently pulsing, it's flashing, it's made of electricity. It earns the name Energy Sword. And again, just a very slow process, and you want to also connect your lightning bolts. Regardless of your lightning pattern, having them intertwine with each other, kind of like a spider web, really adds depth and insanity almost to the weapon. Because when you see this blue-bladed lightning weapon, you want to scare the person. And as you can see, the intertwining little bolts are already starting to come together even before it has dried. Now, once you get one side completely painted, what you want to do is, on the side of the blade, make those little silver marks that you can clearly see right there where that strand goes over. And what you're going to do there is connect it to the other side's lightning bolt. This will make it feel like it has a much more fluid and connected feel. It'll make it feel like those lightning bolts are charging that blue energy to keep it as a field. And you just do those little silver tick marks everywhere that a connecting joint needs to go on the other side of the blade. So every time you make one lightning bolt that goes to the edge, you put a corresponding tick on the outside of the blade. So as you can see just there, I added another piece, and you can see it wrap around to the little silver tick, wrapping it down again to the other little silver tick, and when you flip it over, you will see two corresponding lightning strikes there as well. And you just do that over the whole prop. Now comes painting the hilt. Now, the hilt is completely optional paint. I do not recommend any of the paint I used. This was just my opinion. I wanted to go with bronze and steel, and a little bit of black for the grips. Very simple. You guys can do anything you want. And as always, when you are done using brushes, you always wash them. Because there's no reason to throw away a good brush. You must always clean. Clean, clean. Clean those brushes. Clean those brushes, boy. Oh, yes. Now that we have the hilt fully painted and niced up, we are going to completely cover the entire prop in top coat. In this case, I used tire spray top coat because it's a little bit more durable, and I think it'll work better with a foam prop. You can use pretty much any kind of gloss cover for this. Anything you want to do, it'll work. And of course, before you spray that on, make sure the black specifically on the grips is good, because doing it with black and silver, or specifically steel, means that they need to be flat colors, so they need to be static. They can't be cracked, they can't be messed up. And now adding the top coat is a very simple task of just lightly spraying it all over the prop, not drenching it, not really worrying about it at all, just covering it completely in a nice glossy top coat. It'll give it a nice sheen and will protect the delicate paint that you have spent a couple of hours putting on. There you go. You want to have it hanging up so neither side of the sword is touching. And without further ado,